and welcome to another episode of HealthETalks. Today we have the amazing Catherine Harrison, who has won Nurse of the Year for 2024. Hi, Catherine. How are you doing today?
Hi, Julie. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to us. I know you must be very busy, but we're very excited and eager to learn more about you and your journey into nursing. So tell me, what was your first reaction when you heard you were named Nurse of the Year?
Well, it was the last award of the night, and I was absolutely blown away. I was not expecting it at all. I'd been shortlisted with amazing nurses doing fantastic projects. I was just really pleased that one, I'd paid to take my husband with me, because it's him that gives up most of his weekends and evenings for me to do extracurricular bits and pieces, and that my matron Rachel was there with me because she nominated me for the award. So it was really lovely that both of them could be there for the night with me.
Oh, that's amazing. And can you share a bit about your journey into nursing? What inspired you to pursue this career and what keeps you motivated each day?
So actually, as a child, I wanted to be a doctor. And then as I was coming up through my GCSE and into my A levels, sort of life circumstances and things changed, and I started working in a nursing home and EMI unit. When I was doing my A levels, my grandfather at the time had dementia, and moved into the same unit both myself and my mum worked at. And I worked with some amazing nurses as part of that, and my focus shifted from doctor or from medicine into nursing, and I then opted to do nursing at Sheffield University, as when I went off to university.
Mm,
And really, I think since then, the nurses that I've met along the journey have kind of um, bolstered that. I think,
yes.
yeah, I think, I'm here because of Nurse of the Year, but I'm only here as Nurse of the Year because of standing on the shoulders of giants that have gone before me. So I think, I think of the nurse that I worked with at the nursing home. I think of the amazing nurses that I've worked with within haemophilia. So Joy Farnsworth, who's one of our, who's recently retired from Sheffield, but worked in the service for 36 years.
Sure.
And I know, and amazing nurses who've worked in the UK in haemophilia. Kate, Deborah, just to name a couple that have
Mm.
really um, strived for improvement in patient care, that have made that possible for the rest of us to follow, and do those things too. And I think you know, patients come at the forefront of that. So being
Yes.
being able to make those improvements either locally, nationally, working with NHS England on service specifications, and working with the UK Haemophilia Centre Doctors Organisation on what we need to review when we go and look at services, going through peer review processes, writing guidance, and really standards of practice for people
Mm.
to look towards. And um, I think as the nurse's voice at those tables, we're advocating not just for other nurses around the country, but we're advocating for our patients and families at the forefront of things.
That's so beautiful. Like you said, you're here because of the shoulders of the giants that you stood on, but you're also paving the way for nurses to follow. I think that's beautiful that it's a community. It's just not
Yeah,
individual.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And in your role at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, what are some of the biggest challenges you face and how have you overcome them?
I think one of the biggest challenges that nurses working in the specialist field um, find full stop is visibility of work that they do.
Mm,
Either to managers or to their fellow multidisciplinary colleagues who perhaps don't necessarily understand that if they're not forefront and hands on a patient, that they're doing something.
yes.
So back in 2016 to 2018, in light of a local service improvement project that we'd been looking at, we, well, I actually kind of set about trying to prove the value of our UK haemophilia nurses population, trying to
Mm.
figure out how, what we do. And we all know that we work really hard,
Yes.
but actually, how do you put that in black and white? So initially, I presented at our UK Haemophilia Nurses Association annual meeting and asked others if they would like to come on board and, try and prove this worth with me. And then I spoke to Alison Leary, and eventually we used her Apollo nursing tool to job plan what haemophilia nursing or haemophilia nurse specialists are doing
Mm.
across the UK. And once I pulled all that data in, I then met with our local operations manager in Sheffield, and we went through and costed basically all of this activity that nurses were doing, and she was absolutely flabbergasted. And it changed the way we work locally, and it also raised the profile with NHS England and the wider community about what nurses are doing. It's not new information. It was information that's been, um, found by the
Mm.
RCN historically, but specialist nurses were working independently, and with a wider multidisciplinary team, to ensure that people living with long-term conditions are maintaining their lives as safely and
Yes.
fruitfully as possible in the community. We're preventing admissions, and emergency department attendances, reviewing, assessing, and treating affected people with problems. Um, Relating to that problem, we're seeing people in clinics, both in person and on the telephone, and we're that point of contact. So anybody who's got a long-term condition will have a nurse specialist that
Yes.
is their point of contact. And even before COVID, 40% of our activity was on the telephone, maintaining that advice and guidance
Mm.
for the person, family, and the wider healthcare setting. But obviously, it's not all codable, so we can't record all of it and cost all of that activity.
Yes.
Um, but we navigate people through their healthcare journey with a bleeding disorder impacting on nearly every aspect of their health and lives. So we're providing coordination for surgery at the point of diagnosis when people are pregnant, and we're performing research and audit and sharing that both, locally, nationally, and internationally. And I think while it feels that needing to put a story or a dialogue behind the things that we do can sometimes feel demoralizing, especially if queries are coming from people that you think should actually know what you do,
Mm.
um, I think out of it comes a strength of unity of voice, that what we do every day makes a difference and reassurance to those around us that actually, although some of that work looks invisible, we are doing making a huge difference to both the affected individual and the wider healthcare community.
That's amazing. No wonder you won Nurse of the Year. That's a lot of work and it's hard work and you keep pushing through.
Yeah, I think we have to, because I think otherwise nurses get demoralized and people leave the
Mm.
profession, and we're seeing that. So I think it's important to show what we do and share that evidence.
Yes, definitely. And how do you feel about this award sponsored by HCA Healthcare reflects the importance of recognition in the healthcare field?
So I think what we saw at the Nursing Times Awards was a small glimmer or reflection of what is going on in nursing across the world. So highly educated and skilled nurses working hard to make a difference for people that they look after. If there is a way of making the awards accessible, more accessible, to the wider community, it's quite a costly event to go
Mm.
to, ensuring that even if you're not shortlisted, that there are pieces perhaps in the Nursing Times or in the wider press. It would be great to raise a flag for nursing.
Mm.
It's such a varied profession, and I think if we could recognise that more, we'd both retain and recruit more into the profession.
That would definitely is a good point that you make there because accessibility is all about patient advocacy as well. That's also about accessibility. So why not make the whole event more
Mm,
accessible to people around them?
yeah, absolutely.
And what advice would you give to young nurses who look up to you as a role model and aspire to achieve similar recognition in their careers?
This is quite difficult because, as my colleagues would tell you, I'm a bit of a yes person, and I've taken up most opportunities that have been provided to me throughout my career, and taken leaps where perhaps others have said, I think maybe you've got quite a lot on already, and you probably shouldn't do anything else. And because of that, I work way more than my contracted full-time hours. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the capacity to do that or wants to do that. But what I would say is, like the Navy and Army adverts, a career in nursing has an incredible array of opportunities. So if you've completed your training, and you've started on a ward and you're not sure, just give it 6 months, and
Mm,
see if you change your mind for starters. I hated haematology for my first 3 months. I went home every night crying. I said to my mum, "What have I done?" And I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to make the doctors pay attention when I thought there was something wrong with people. And I worked with my mentor, Rosie, at the time, and she gave me great advice about bringing the evidence to support concerns. So if I'd got, if your nursey sense was going, there's something wrong here, you know,
mm,
actually, how do you articulate that to somebody else who holds the power to make a difference? And at 3 months, it just clicked. And I loved it. And I was lucky to work in haematology at a time where we performed rotations. So we worked in the inpatient setting, we worked in our haematology day ward unit, and we worked in the haemophilia centre. So I saw a vast array of, that speciality. Uh,
yes.
and we had a great clinical educator at the time as well. So this is 25 years ago, and a great ward manager. And we had fantastic induction, which included laboratories as well as sort of hands-on within the unit, which allowed us to see that real sort of broadness of the
Mm,
speciality. And following getting my E grade, I then went on to complete a secondment in the haemophilia centre before getting a permanent post. But if it hadn't clicked, I think, if we consider the variety of posts available, being brave and
mm,
taking a leap to something different is, there's so much out there. If you've not, if you don't love it, just go somewhere else and find your niche. There's so much
mm,
opportunity. So don't just stick with it, because actually, if you don't like it after 6 months, it's just going to grind you down. And then people leave full
definitely.
then people leave full stop. So, change where you go rather than changing a career completely.
Enjoying this episode? Ever thought of starting your own podcast? Podup.com is your go-to. They've got everything you need to run a pro show, including 35 or more AI-powered tools for success. Sign up today for a free starter account and get 15% off with the code HealthyTalks15. The code is HealthyTalks15. Plus, check out podallies.com for a done-for-you podcasting experience, complete with website, social media, and editing. Start now and let's launch your podcast together.
Exactly. Like you said, so many different specialities
Yeah,
and departments in nursing that if you don't want to like something, go to the next one.
absolutely. Yeah.
And during your time as a nurse, is there a particular patient or experience that has left a lasting impact on you?
So I've actually got three things that I'm going
Ooh,
to talk about with this. So the first is a young, so in his 30s, severe haemophilia A gentleman who had severe ankle arthropathy. So ankle arthropathy is the breakdown of the lining of the joints when there has been um, bleeding into them, and it presents a bit like an early arthritis picture. So he was in his early 30s. He had a young daughter. He came to clinic, really struggling with his mobility, working full time. Um, and he described working all day at work and then would get home, and his daughter was learning to walk, and he had to crawl because of
mm,
the impact of the pain and the mobility issues with his ankles. So he did eventually go on to have ankle surgery to support the condition, but just the reality of living with that condition, of him still working full time and wanting to support his family with his career and the job that he had, but also spending time with his family and just not being able to do the things that normal dads would do, young dads would
Mm.
do, and having to crawl while his daughter was learning to walk. I think that's quite a powerful um, story
Yes,
for
definitely.
understanding how somebody's impacted by their condition. The second one is one of our women with von Willebrand's disease, which is a fairly common bleeding disorder, who presented to the haemophilia centre with a prolonged and heavy menstrual bleeding, which again is one of the most common symptoms for women with bleeding disorders. And I performed some bloods and examined her, and there were a few things gynecologically that I thought was going on. But I sent her off for a coffee while we waited for bloods, and when she came back, her bloods came back, and she was profoundly anemic. So not just iron deficient,
Mm.
profoundly anemic with a hemoglobin in her boots of about 60.
Sure.
And I said to her, how long have you felt, how long has this been going on? And her husband came in with her for the second part of the consultation. And he said, I've been trying to say to her for months to come and get some help because of how significant her heavy menstrual bleeding has
Mm.
been. And it's only at the point now where she hasn't been able to walk across the office without being short of breath that she's now come to you. So, and she said, "Oh, I just thought I'd, come down with something or something. I was struggling on the school run. I was short of breath on the school run, um, and I just, it shows what people will put up with. And not, we're there, we're available. And she did end up actually having to have a blood transfusion. But we could one, help with the heavy menstrual bleeding, and two, we can support with iron supplements before somebody becomes so profoundly anemic that they're needing a blood transfusion. Um, so it's just amazing how much people will put up with before they come and access care. And if people haven't got a diagnosis, people are living like this out there um, in the world,
Yes.
living with all of these symptoms and conditions and not accessing care because they haven't got a diagnosis. So I think that was the second thing. And the final thing, which I think has the most impact on me, really, was working in the World Federation of Haemophilia World Congress treatment room in 2018 in Glasgow. So the World Federation of Haemophilia is an international charity dedicated to supporting um, care provision for people living with bleeding disorders across the world. And every 2 years they come together to have a World Congress. So, and as part of that, they bring patient representatives from all countries around the world to events before the meeting and then for them to stay to learn throughout the meeting. And as part of that, uh, the country that's hosting runs a treatment centre. And that means that all of the industry supporters, so the pharmaceutical companies, they donate clotting factor to the charity, and we can support patients who've attended, many from countries where they do not have the capacity to access freely available clotting factor, like we're lucky enough to provide in the UK. And um, they are coming with such profound disabilities because
Mm.
of the bleeding that they've had, secondary to little access to treatment. But they are coming to advocate for their peers, for their country's
Yes.
peers, and to bring that voice to the conversation. And it's just incredible. So we worked there. It was so nurses and physios predominantly, with some medical support in Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was like having a staff room at a conference, because all the UK nurses that were able to come to the conference worked in that room alongside our physiotherapy colleagues, assessing patients, making treatment plans, treating them with clotting factor concentrate, and it was just incredible. Google Translate at its best, trying to talk to people from all around the world in all different countries. And yeah, it was just an incredible experience, and something I'll never forget.
That's amazing. There's a really amazing stories, and I can see how it's had a lasting impact on you.
Yeah.
And how do you balance the emotional demands that comes with nursing with your personal well-being? Do you have any self-care routines that help, as we know that nurse burnout is a huge problem at the moment?
Yeah, I so first off I'd say my family. So I have husband and two kids. We lead very busy lives with, kids always have much more busy social lives than we
Yes.
do, don't they? But so both kids are big rugby players. So and so on Saturday I was first aiding for my under 15s sons team. So really mucking in and doing that sort of thing with the families. Fantastic, spending time with them. Love food. But also, I would say I get my flow from creative outlets. So I paint. I like to read, and I suppose painting probably is my most creative outlet. Once I'm in the zone with that, I can lose hours. And gardening as well. So,
Yes.
but we moved house recently, so the garden is a state and is going to be left until the house is done. But so not losing so many hours at the minute, but yeah. So I think having that other type of outlet is important, and lots of my colleagues that I work with have similar sort of things. So one colleague is really crafts quite a lot, and another colleague actually writes. She's just written a book. So it's these sorts of things. What other things can you do too that is completely different? And I think I'm very I use social media quite a lot. So if I'm at a conference, I will constantly tweet through, or tweet X, whatever we do these days, um, throughout the congress, the conference. I share, if I've read a useful article, I'll share that. Trying to keep abreast of things and share that information. But when I'm really struggling, social media goes out the window. So I know what are my triggers. I know when I need to pull back. And that's come over time. As I said, I am a yes person. I do recognise when I'm veering towards burnout, and what
Mm,
what are the things I need to do to prevent that going any further.
that's amazing. And what are some of the ways you think healthcare teams can better support each other, especially during challenging times like the recent pandemic?
So I think one of the things is about not working in silos, and I think the really important thing for us that came out of COVID was, whilst there was that sense of responsibility from myself as sort of team lead, that looking after both our patients and looking after our staff was incredibly difficult, especially when 50% of our staff were relocated out of the unit. And I think for us, one of the things that we did was we implemented psychological supervision within the team.
Mm,
And we did that with our own psychologist, because we've got a psychologist who works with our MDT. But we were also supported, we were able to gain further support from that if needed by the trust, because they introduced emotional well-being support through their well-being platform. So staff could approach that individually, but we did it as a group. So we did it as a team. The psychological supervision, and additional to that, I think clinical supervision is really important, not just for things like the pandemic, but I've done a number of really complex safeguarding cases, and the sessions that I've done where I've had really sort of supportive formal clinical supervision have been much easier. And when, as much as you can say that a complex safeguarding case is easy, but
yeah.
it's felt less of a personal burden than cases that I've done where I haven't had that. And I think that's important, because it can feel like it's all your responsibility and all yours to hold, and it's not. So I think it's important um, that we can recognise that in others.
Yes, definitely.
Whilst working in a complex case over the last couple of years, being able to be there for a colleague as well, so them not having that capacity, that I can provide that to them because I'm getting that elsewhere. So I think that's really important, particularly if you're working in either as an individual within a speciality, or if you're just in very small teams, being able to reach out and get that wider support.
Definitely agree with you on that one. And how has working in Sheffield influenced your approach to healthcare, and what's unique about serving this community?
Um, I suppose a bit like my parents, the Sheffield Bleeding Disorders team have not suppressed my Y-bird tendency. Um, so, um, so I was always known as the Y-bird as a child, and I think working in bleeding disorders has um, really strengthened that tendency in me. So why does this work like that? Why does that work like that? Why are people behaving like that? What are we doing like for? What, all of those sort of constant questions. And I
Yeah.
think if I'd worked in a team where every time I'd asked a question, it was because, or, not a, oh, that's a really good question. Well, there's this paper on this, and this person's done this evidence, and being able to ask those questions of the wider MDT, being able to ask those questions of our senior medical clinicians, and understand why something works the way it works, or being able to ask, and even if they don't know, them say, I don't know. Let's go and find out
Mm,
together. Or let's do a research project, or all these sorts of things that if if I'd been pushed back, or approached slightly differently, then perhaps I wouldn't have nurtured that in the same way. So I think that's the positive things. What I don't know what's unique about serving the community. I suppose the bleeding disorders community. I think if we're thinking it rare diseases, this isn't personal to Sheffield, but actually just about the global bleeding disorders community. Whilst it's a we're talking about rare diseases, they are such a huge collaborative community, um, which is absolutely fantastic. So everybody works together with that one goal of excellent care for people with bleeding disorders. So and that's patients coming together and lending their voice to the conversation. That's all of the different disciplines that work within the MDT, and that's everybody, that non-hierarchical approach to the conversation, whether that be at an MDT or that be at an international conference,
mm.
being able to everybody stand up and ask that question. And I have to admit, I've been doing it nearly 20 years, and it's only recently I've got brave enough to stand up in front of umpteen thousand people and ask a question of the big boys at the front, or the big boys and girls at the front. But it, if you've got that dying question, um, that people are kind enough to actually listen and give a response back. And if they don't give a response back, that you've been able to chase them down, or somebody will know that person that you could go and talk to afterwards. And that's what's really good about the community, I think.
That's amazing. And Catherine, you've given such great insight into hematology and nursing and your career. The last question I have for you today for our listeners is, what do you hope to accomplish next in your career, and how do you plan to use this award as a platform for positive change?
So I'm hoping to raise a bit of wider awareness about bleeding disorders, hopefully, in the next year. So as I said, I'm quite a keen user of social media. So I've already been able to expand people that I'm able to connect with, which is fantastic. I think if that just gets people diagnosed that a little bit earlier, that's a win. Making people more aware of women's health, that heavy menstrual bleeding and postpartum hemorrhages,
Mm.
risk of iron deficiency, and the impact that that has on people. So I think if that's the only thing, that's something that's amazing. I think if we can raise awareness that nursing's not just not just working on a ward, all the other amazing things that happen in nursing that that you have capacity to do once you've undertook your basic training, that would be a positive change too. And on a personal note, it would be I'm hoping at some point in the near future to do my PhD, but I will still be doing many other things. So still
Yes.
working with the World Federation of Haemophilia, and still working with our local UK charities, the Haemophilia Society, and other charities. And yeah, I will probably still be as busy as ever. and have been slightly busier, as you might imagine, of late,
Yes.
since this happened. But yeah, just raising a bit more awareness is going to be fantastic.
So no slowing down for you at all.
No, not for the time being.
That's amazing. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. And once again, congratulations on winning this amazing reward. And I hope that our listeners also learn something new about you and your career.
Thanks very much.
And to all our listeners out there, remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of Healthy Talks.